Do you always give someone a shot past the opener, or are there times where you hang up right in the opener?
I usually, so I won't hang up on the opener.
You don't choose sales, sales chooses you. Tell us what that means and how it manifested in your own trajectory.
The beauty of like leaving a well thought out voicemail is so important too. Like I actually may not pick up the call, but I will listen to the voicemail.
Oh, really?
You know,
You listen to the voicemail?
Yep, yep. And I think like, if it's somebody who reached out and just talking to me about a problem that I'm actually really thinking about at that moment and they left a voicemail about how they can help me on that, like probably will call them back.
John Eitel, what an honor to have you on the podcast. You started out at Dell as a seller. Then you went to Rackspace at the VP level. You climbed the ranks. You made it to Spiceworks. Where'd you go after that? I know you made your way to WP Engine. You made your way to Canva. You made your way to eventually CRO of Demandbase, and now the Chief Growth Officer at Orum. It's funny, I'm trying to remember all of it. Dude, you were like a Hall of Famer when it comes to tech sales. And by the way, did I miss one of the steps? I got it all?
You nailed it. Yep.
Yeah. It's like when you're in class and you want to get it right. And so,
get them all.
So what's really cool, John, the reason I'm getting chills right now, I'm so excited about this, is I have SDRs and AEs at Dell watching this podcast and this channel. They're going to see themselves in you. I spoke to an SDR recently and I said, what are your aspirational vision? What are your dreams? I want to be a C-level executive. I speak to another guy trying to break into tech sales. What do you want to do aspirationally? I can't help it because I'm a dreamer and I project that onto other people. Mm-hmm. Some people bring me back and they're like, I just want to get an SDR role and get to AE. This other guy wanted to be a CRO like you. So we're going to talk about the path to the C-suite. So let's get into it. We're going to start off by digging into an expression you shared with me. You don't choose sales, sales chooses you. Tell us what that means and how it manifested in your own trajectory.
Yeah, look, it's so important the work you do too, Chris. I would say like mentoring and advising, like I'm, so excited to spend time with you on this. I feel like, back to that comment, I do feel like most folks get into sales, usually through career pivots, other choices, things that didn't work out, doors that closed and others that opened, right? And so some of the best sellers I feel like come from nonlinear backgrounds, eclectic backgrounds. I think it's a great profession that, when people get there and they've done all the, work to build up to that, it really, can change things. But yeah, using my own example or my own story on this, I was supposed to be a doctor. I actually went to school, was a biology major at UT. It was because I was good at math and science and enjoyed working with people. That was why people pushed me that way. I got through my 4 years of undergrad and realized like, gosh, I don't really enjoy hospitals, like the smell, like the urgency and like, life or death situations.
The smell.
Yeah. Just little things that, you kind of realize. And I think that, also I would say like part of this whole story is like, it's hard to pick the course of your career at age 18, at 21, at 27, right? And so, again, that was my kind of moment where I was like, okay, this door is closing. Where do I go next? And I do remember, for me, and you were sharing your story on this, so I think I'd love to layer yours on. But, I actually worked in the field. Like I worked in hospitals and had like 9 to 5 jobs. And I remember I would make, X dollars at the end of the week because I was confined by like my hourly and my salary. And that was, kind of what, that career had for me. Inversely, when I was at UT, I worked on Fridays and Saturday nights out at like the Oasis and all these different
cool.
bars.
That's a fun spot. They have a powerful drink back when I used to drink, because I don't anymore.
Yeah.
That would rock you. And I think there was a limit to how many you could have.
Yeah.
So,
it was.
But what have you?
It was a fun spot. But yeah, I would love that. Like I could go work Friday, Saturday, and I could make, 10x what I would make Monday through Friday in a regular kind of, 9 to 5 job with an hourly wage. So for me, it was like an easy answer to think about, like, okay, if I want to choose my next kind of, direction to go, I want it to be one where I can actually, like, my hard work is tied to the outcomes that I'm able to drive, and like that I can have actual, like, limitless, kind of opportunities, when it comes to earning potential. And so, I came out of school also at the height of the dot-conomy. So I went to go chase the gold rush that was tech and got there right as the party ended. So I was there for the cleanup afterwards. And I would say, like, as we go through, another, set of these kind of same, conditions and cycles, It was helpful for me to do that. But I felt like it was great for me to get to Dell. Dell had gone public 4 or 5 years prior. I wanted to go try my hand at a startup. I thought it was a startup. I realized when I got there that like that work had been done and it was pretty full-fledged on its way. But it gave me some great exposure to like, how do you sell to big companies? How do you work with enterprise brands? And it also gave me the opportunity to like really make some money quick. Like I was able to pay off student, loans in my first year with like commissions I was bringing in. I was able to buy like a wedding ring for my wife, paid cash on that, which I think was like, this is what this career path affords you, is the ability to be able to take, big swings. And when you're successful, be able to really make a meaningful impact for your family.
It's funny you were considering the doctor route. When I was in college, in undergraduate, I was on the pre-med track. I took biology, and I'm going to speak some French. It kicked my ass.
Yeah.
And I decided, I don't know if I'm passionate about that. So I bowed out earlier than you did.
Yeah.
But what's cool is there's a guy in the industry. I don't know if you know him, Kyle Van Voris, but he puts out some good content. I had him on the podcast, and he said, in sales, you can make as much or more than doctors without having to cut anyone open. So you did it, man.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm going to guess you've made a lot more than you would have as a doctor. So let's go.
Yeah.
And I have to ask, in terms of your transition, you were a part of the UT's crew team, right? How did that translate? Because I'm just going to tell you, I know athletes do well in sales. I've seen it time and time again, and you were an athlete. But can you talk about maybe the qualities, disciplines, and how that might have helped set you up for success in sales?
Like it was a time when UT's team wasn't great. So I would say like, I'd love to say that, I was on the team today, but look, being a college athlete, like, spending that time with crew, like meant that I was getting up at 5 a.m. and like riding my bike down to, Town Lake, now Lady Bird Lake, to go row. And I would row for 2 hours with the team and, do a workout and then get back. And like, I was showing up for 8 o'clock classes, and so it was like, really showed me like, you have to, time manage and prioritize and have that kind of discipline. It probably also like impeded a little bit of my college life at times where I was like, okay, like friends are going out for a drink, probably can't go get a drink tonight because, that's going to have impacts on how I row and work out the next day. And so, it's good to have that structure and that discipline early on. And I think that's what a lot of athletes, have when they've, committed so much of their life to their craft. It easily, I think, translates well into sales, which is very discipline focused.
So you quickly went from individual contributor to leadership and even the VP level once you got to Rackspace. But I just want to dig into any mindset, skill set, or approaches, factors that helped you really succeed as an individual contributor. I want to talk about this before we get to, the leadership part of your journey.
Totally. Look, I think actually like I'm old school in some ways, and look, I've changed, over time too, but I would say, in what was ingrained into me early was like dress for the job that you want, not the one you have. And so I remember I was someone who like, wore pressed shirts and slacks to a, Dell at the time that was very much like, polos and jeans, maybe t-shirts and jeans. And so, I stood out actually at that time, but I think it actually was a good thing in retrospect. Like it probably like signaled to the business, like this guy's taking it serious.
Yes.
He's somebody we want to invest in. And so I think, look, the world has shifted and changed. And I think that, I don't ever hope to dry clean, half of my wardrobe again. And, as you see, I'm rocking a t-shirt today. I think whatever that is, those signals that you can send to the business, I think matter. I was really good about also like, maybe this is kind of like, my athletics background, but I was like someone who got to the office early, like an hour or two before everybody else did. And I stayed late. And I think like, I wanted to set up my day and be prepared, but I think like, that's when the leaders got there and they were able to see, that I was in the office, that I was taking my career seriously. And I think that signaled to them in some really great ways. And I think actually, a number of them kind of took me under their wing and were like, I want to invest in you. And so I do think like, figuring out how you do that if you're back in office. I know a lot of folks who probably listen to this aren't in office and may never go back to an office. And, there's ways to do that same signaling and show up in the best way and show up prepared, and I think just thinking about those things and making sure you prioritize them is so important. But yeah, I think that was, something for me was, one, I really, showed up with the future job in mind and that kind of, permeated through how I like, operated, executed and did things.
You remind me of a friend of mine that has such a great story. I forget if he was in sales or he was in some corporate job. And one day he decided to enter the office with a suit, but he wasn't wearing a suit. All of a sudden, his boss reaches out after and says, "Hey, can we talk?" He thought he was interviewing for other jobs and he got a pay raise.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Funny
That's
enough,
amazing.
this guy, he's a good looking guy, and I think he modeled on the side. And he ended up going into like men's fashion, and that was his story. He hung his hat on, but an example of signaling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so you were sending signals by that you respected the opportunity by getting in the office early, dressing really well, preparing.
Yeah.
I just saw a talk by this guy, Ty Bennett, top keynote speaker on high performance. And he said preparation was one of like maybe 4 factors. And it's funny how he said that came first. Were there any other aspects, like, for example, relationship building your political capital that were critical to getting you to the next level? And quick pause, I need to clarify, did you start out as an AE or were you SDR to AE?
So I was, at the time, the SDR wasn't a thing at that kind of point.
Okay.
Dell's, at the time, I was an inside, kind of ISR is what they called it, inside sales rep, which was basically a glorified, kind of SDR who had some full closing, opportunities there. But it was bottom of the, I'd say the pecking order. It was like starting, with the, not the best job. And through that was able to kind of work up, from there, which I think was a lot of, kind of a lot of fun and really kind of helpful in my career to be able to, kind of move through those rungs and see it kind of pan out.
So you were doing some outbound though, even you were a closer, but you're reaching out. And so what I want to do is almost like jump ahead now to the present moment. You as a C-level executive, if someone were to like reach out to you, what's an example, maybe even recently, messaging that might have resonated? It could have been an email, it could have been a cold call, but just for the audience to gain some empathy, especially for the early sellers, and like how could I get resonate with someone like John?
Tech sales is an amazing career path where you can make as much as doctors and lawyers without having to cut anyone open or work ungodly hours. Looking back 10 years later, having personally started out in tech sales at Oracle, then moved to Google Cloud and a startup, and now fully launching into entrepreneurship, I can say with confidence that tech sales transformed my life through the income that it produced, the skill development, the connections, and the self-development that I unlocked along the journey. If you're someone who wants to strategically build your own 6-figure tech sales career without wasting valuable time and earnings potential, then consider Tech Sales Accelerator and our 12-week programs as your blueprint. Our partners are breaking in and crushing quota at top companies like Oracle, Google Cloud, VMware, and Salesforce, leveraging our in-depth video content, one-on-one coaching, community, and network access. And we'd love to partner with you too to accelerate your own success on this path. If you'd like to learn more about Tech Sales Accelerator and our programs, then feel welcome to book time at my Calendly link, linked in the description of this video, and we'll walk you through all the details. Or just download my free cold calling system that's going to help you crush the phones quickly, also linked in the description of this video. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. Look, I think actually it's so hard to do right now. And I think like I think cold calling outbound is a lost art. And I think that's a shame. And so I do think like, I'll bring it back to that. But I would say like the way to get through to me is like breaking through the signal to noise ratio. Like if everybody's doing, X, do Y, do something different from others. And that's how you stand out. Because I think like, the way my brain works, unfortunately, is like I can spot, like generic emails that have been written for lots of people that were sent to me, heavily AI generated, not personalized. I'm like, okay, not interested.
Yeah.
But if somebody were to take the time to actually like show that they've researched me, maybe they've listened to podcasts that I've been on, like they know a bit about my background and my career, and they show up with a message that really kind of stands out, like that matters. I think, again, back to, outbounding too, I do feel like that's such a powerful thing. Like, I think since, the world has shifted and, the ability to get, data at your fingertips for, what is the person's contact information, how do I reach them best, all those things, it's just become harder. And so a lot of people are over-indexing on social and email. And I just think like cold calls, like I actually pick them up more often, now that I say this, I'm probably going to get inundated.
Oh.
Unfortunately. But look, I respect that people are kind of taking a different path, a harder path, to reach me.
Yeah.
Look, and if they land it with the right message, like I'm going to definitely give it a listen or be able to, kind of like hear them out here. And I think also like, I'm also busy, but I would say that the beauty of like leaving a well thought out voicemail is so important too. Like I actually may not pick up the call, but I will listen to the voicemail.
Oh, really? You listen to the voicemail?
Yep. And I think like that's always the thing. Like people
Wow.
say C-level executives don't answer the phone. Like if I don't know the number and I'm in a meeting, I'm probably not going to pick it up in the middle of the meeting and shortcut the meeting and, grab it. But, if it's somebody who reached out and just talking to me about a problem that I'm actually really thinking about at that moment and they left a voicemail about how they can help me on that, like probably will call them back. So I think like, don't skip that step too. I think some people leave at that, like didn't get a connect, didn't get a pickup, not going to take the step or, follow through, do it. I would say actually like that's something that really does, kind of resonate there.
What a gem we just uncovered that I didn't expect to in this conversation. I made a video on how to leave a great voicemail for my channel.
Yeah.
And very few people watched it because people aren't searching for it, and they should be.
Mm-hmm.
You just highlighted that a C-level executive will actually take the time to listen to it, and you might call back if it's relevant.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like at the end of the day, good messaging. One, it's very personalized where it shows someone actually cares to know you.
Yeah.
And the message they send you, the personalization, wouldn't make sense for anyone else. And they're leading with relevant problems you might care about.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to understand that. In terms of like a call opener, we're getting a little tactical, but would you give most anyone a shot when they hit you with an opener? Because we've got permission-based openers like, hey, John, it's Chris calling from Orum. I probably caught you in the middle of something, but before I go any further, you have a minute for me to share why I'm reaching out to you specifically.
Yeah.
I'm piquing a little curiosity, like maybe I have a specific reason, but do you always give someone a shot past the opener, or are there times where you hang up right in the opener?
I usually, I won't hang up on the opener. I want to hear it out. And again, being the student of the craft.
You have empathy. That's the difference, right? Maybe a CTO would be different.
Yeah. And you will find, there are plenty of folks that are the opposite of me on this one. But yes, I do think like, keep in mind that, I'm probably overtasked and running, late for a meeting. So when I do grab it, like, I think the opener can be clutch. And I think like, the reason that I'm calling,
So should we get
yes.
right? Like, I wonder though, like, and I've used this in the real world. It's worked. Actually, there's a guy, Jason Bay of Outbound Squad, that he's become.
Jason,
it's funny.
Some work with him.
Hey, he was sitting in your chair, man. That's so cool.
All right.
Okay,
awesome.
so you guys have worked with him.
Yeah, we just released a report with Jason. Like,
beautiful.
Huge fan of his work. So
let's link that report. I'll follow up with you, and we'll put in the description of the video. And now that we're in cold calling, we're going to talk about Orum because I'm excited about Orum. And you're 2 months in, and you chose Orum for a reason. So, but anyways, I think that's fun to see the synergies. Shout out to Jason Bay.
Yeah.
But do you think though, like the opener I shared is permission based, and that is actually Jason's, the best artist steal. I probably caught you in the middle of something.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think like, would you even like, if you made the cold call, would you get to the point sooner? Like, would you just be like, just even more quickly, like, this is why I'm calling?
Yeah.
How would you do it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think like someone put that into my head, like, early in my kind of like listening to sales trainers, but just the reason for my call, like immediately, like again, ask for permission, right? Sorry. But the transition, clarify is, like instead of trying to like make, kind of conversation to banter, like just respecting that and just say, look, the reason for my call is this, like, here's what we're hearing from others in your shoes. We've helped, XYZ with this, would love to talk to you about if we could be a good fit. I think like brevity is a powerful thing there, and it's a good way to capture me in that moment and maybe turn it into something, that could be meaningful there.
Brevity is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
This, and what you just framed up, you gave us a framework. We talked to people like you solving this. Boom, get right into it. I had a guy cold call me, and he kind of talked like, hey man, like, and first off, he seemed too chill.
Yeah.
Like, talk about, we send signals of professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, partly your tone, and I was like, hey, can I help you? And classic. And he's like, yeah. And he wasn't getting to the point. I said, can you please get to the point? And then he hung up on himself, which you never do. But it's like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Get to the point. So, hey, let's talk Orum. Y'all are making waves, helping people be more effective on the phone, get more meetings. But I just want to hear from you, like, what might that value prop look like in the cold call for Orum? Like, we work with other, to solve this.
Yeah.
Let's just do that because it's fun. And then I do want to understand, like, what drew you to Orum.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story
so,
on that. But no, I think it's, super exciting what we're doing. And I actually, have seen the impact. I've seen the pain. And, that's the fun thing is selling to sales leaders, is a fun place to be because I understand like what they're going through. And I know that we can provide a better solution. And I've always liked to align myself with like products and brands that I believe in. Like I've never been one to sign up, for something that just is not done, something that I align with personally or that I don't feel like I could genuinely represent.
Yes.
And that's Orum for me. Look, a little bit of the story of how I got there, weaving that together with this had the longest interview possible. But, 2 years ago, I met Colin, who's been a guest on the show as well.
Colin.
He
was awesome.
Amazing, legendary, sales leader. But met him at the Outreach conference maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. Just because I loved what they were building. And, the premise then at the beginnings was, that, outbounding is becoming harder and harder. It's becoming a lost art. People are pivoting away from it. They created a really powerful tool with some very sharp intellectual property that, allows us to make connections with, very busy professionals, knowing like, if you want to reach John, what time do you, want to call? What's the best, kind of number to use to reach John? Like, to increase your odds, and to be able to make yourself more effective, like you should be using a tool like Orum. So anyways, met Colin, immediately hit it off with Colin. My reach out to them and connecting with them was like, look, I'm a big fan of what you're building, like keep going. He connected me with Jason, who's the founder. Jason's got a great story. He actually built Rubrik's SDR motion.
No way.
Fully. Launched them, internationally. Like he lived in Amsterdam at one point. Had some really big roles during Rubrik's, kind of hyper growth years. And, he procured a lot of software and bought a lot of tools. And he was like, I kept looking for what is Orum today, and it didn't exist in the market. And so that was his signal to go, build the product and build the platform. But anyways, he's become a friend. We both live in Austin, so we catch up every 6 months, and it's funny. We had a regular catch up in kind of February of this year. And, he basically said, hey, look, we're scaling and growing in new ways. We're hitting all these kind of new challenges as we kind of grow up as a company. The board's asked me to go look for someone to kind of help partner on this. What are you doing? And so that was kind of my connection to it. And so I really, again, love the product, love the early Genesis story. I'm really excited about what we're doing next too. I think like a lot of your audience is SDRs. I think like we are, in a lot of ways going to save sales. We're going to help SDRs be more effective, with our AI coaching and role play, like the stuff that we have, like, I think it's just so beneficial. I wish I would have had it when I was starting out in my career. I would have probably, progressed through the ranks faster. And, I think it's an opportunity to have some really powerful tools at your hands if you're in that seat.
I'm excited about the AI coaching. Colin and I were talking about it. I mean, the fastest path to learning and growing in sales is through doing, and you get to do that with Orum. And you can scale that. If I'm a leader, it's like I can scale the way we enable our new hires to ramp up more quickly. Okay, we have a new go-to-market pivot and we need to push out enablement to a ton of people in cold calling. We can scale that training quickly. So I have to say, shout out to Michael Karp, one of the SDRs turned AEs at Ramp, that I am so honored, John, that he reached out after a year. I'd never met him. And he said the channel helped him get into Ramp, one of the best fintechs in New York City. Now he's at AE. When I talked to him, I had him on the podcast because it's fun to have SDRs to hear what's working. Mm-hmm. He says, there's, I use this technology called Orum.
Yeah.
And it helps me crush it. Yeah. So look at the best
awesome.
Companies. Ramp is one of the greatest companies out there. They're using Orum. So, hey, let's hype it up a little more. Who are some other great customers of yours that are public that you can share that like you're just excited about some of these?
Yeah, look, we serve a wide, base of customers. And I think it is, like the biggest brands in the world, like IBM,
nice.
SAP, Wiz is on the platform as well. So we've got some like really great, kind of customers that are doing impactful things. CrowdStrike's another one. But we work all the way down to like SMBs. And I would say like, that's even cooler. Like, I think the ability to be able to work with, again, these like machines that really are doing impactful things at massive scale. But then the next whiz, like, I think there's a lot of, customers that we have kind of in our kind of what we call our growth segment that are going to be, hopefully the next batch of up and comers. And it's just so much fun to see like how they're thinking about that and how they are using innovative tools like Orum to speed their, journey here.
Wow. It's cool to see a company like Wiz that I believe they're one of the fastest companies in their space to 100 million. It was something like that?
Yeah.
Right. And they're acquired by Google.
Kind of
which
a big
is crazy.
deal.
It's
Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
they're acquired by Google because I was at Google Cloud. Then I went to the partner side. I actually did a little more with AWS to the dismay of my Google Cloud friends. And
you were a double agent there?
Yeah. I was playing in the field.
Yeah.
Seriously, I was in the Google office, AWS. It was fun. But it's interesting with Wiz, though, because they had a partnership, like big time partnership with AWS, and they get acquired by Google. But clearly they must have seen the value, like to be enough to be acquired by Google to, because that's an interesting dynamic. And by the way, that's a tangent, but I'm sure you've seen some crazy acquisitions and moves in your time.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring us back to I guess, is there anything else you want to add in terms of what you're excited about going forward with Orum? And then I think I'm going to bring us back to your journey, maybe even look at Rackspace a little bit, poke around and see where we go. So anything else you'd add about what you're excited about, man?
Yeah. No, look, I do think, actually credit to Colin again. He is the best at energy and motivation and getting folks going. But he and I talked during the interview process again, when we reconnected, and it was funny. I was like, look, everything you're building, I believe in, and the world needs it now. And he was like, man, I have this mantra that we're here to save sales. And I was
okay, I love that.
I believe
that
it.
got me going.
Yeah. I believe
it's I want to save sales. Guys, check out,
yes.
I'm knocking over water bottles. Check out Orum. We're going to save sales. This is a mission we can get behind. But yeah, speaking of being an energy guy, I think you're saying Colin's an energy guy. I did, when I was researching him, I saw him with a banana, doing fun things.
Yeah.
So, all right. So when you were at Rackspace, which is an amazing tech company, I remember when I was at Google Cloud, they'd come in and train our sellers, in the cloud space. They're a great company. You moved up that. You ascended to VP, didn't you? What was your trajectory like? And maybe it'd be nice to know some of the keys that did leadership also call you? You said you don't choose sales. Sales calls you. Is it the same with leadership?
It is. Yeah, that's a good parallel to draw there. Look, I think actually, the fun part about my career, and I'll make it, things that people can actually use today too. But, I got to Dell thinking it was a, startup, when I got there, I realized it wasn't a startup, right? It was a pretty well-oiled machine. And it was great for me at that phase of my career because again, I got such great resourcing, training, exposure to what big companies do and how they buy, but it wasn't a startup. And so I really was want to try my hand at an early stage startup. And so I, through a partner that I worked with, he was like, you should go talk to these guys at Rackspace. They're doing some pretty cool things. For context, they were about 50 people at the time. So this was this small company,
oh yeah,
a team with a dream. And it was kind of funny. I put my resume in and, this rarely ever happens. And this was a magical moment. I submitted it and got a call the next day where it was can you come meet with us? And, the really neat thing about, how life and timing works, they had just landed their first big account, their first enterprise account. And so they were kind of like the dog that caught the car, and they were like, we don't know what to do with it. And you've been at Dell working on these really big, kind of name accounts. Could you come on board and help us, one, land this account, make sure that we serve it successfully. And so it was one of those fun things where I was like, this is it. I want to go try my hand at a startup. I really, believe in what when I talked to the founders and I talked to the other executives at the time, I was like, this is going to be fun. And so it was where I grew up. I spent 13 years at Rackspace in total. That first job was, being basically AE working with existing accounts. It was first that big one that they'd already landed. Then it was go land more of them. And we did. And then it was let's go build a team to go after more of these. So how do we build a, kind of a sales effort around enterprise? So that's probably where I started to get kind of dragged into leadership, where they were like, John kind of knows it and has been doing it.
Yes.
He can go find others. It was actually kind of fun too. When you are in an early stage startup, you definitely get pushed out of your comfort zone at different times. And I was always getting pushed out of my comfort zone. But I think the fun thing is we found out quickly the enterprise accounts we won, we weren't serving them well and they were unhappy. And so it was okay, John, you, the CTO and the chief product officer, you three kind of know the most about these customers. Go figure out what the product offering needs to be. How would we change it and evolve it? And so it kind of gave me a chance to flex a different muscle and, move completely out of my, kind of lane there for a bit. I through a couple of other iterations, about halfway through my time at Rackspace. For those that don't know, Rackspace was called Rackspace because that was how you got a website online in the early days of the internet, was
Oh,
you got
okay.
a server in a rack. And 6 years in, the cloud became a thing. And so
Yeah.
actually Amazon and Rackspace were the first two to market with the cloud offering. It's an interesting story of like, how do you have a lead and lose it? Because I think, obviously
Crazy.
the cloud war is now, I think the big three.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Rackspace doesn't get.
And they had a lead.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
unfortunately, but it was also, it was a great moment in my career because we were starting to sell this thing that scaled up and scaled down. It didn't have contracts and commitments to it, or it didn't have, it was hard to pay sales reps on it, right? It was like, how do you pay people on like the opportunity when they just buy a little thing at the beginning, but it scales up? And so they were like, John, go figure out what a cloud sales team needs to look like. And so I built our first kind of cloud sales team at that time. I got to like pioneer on like comp models and like, incentive structures and how you motivate people. Like, what does that seller context need to look like? And you sold this, like I think the early days of the cloud, it was
it's
very technical buyers,
it's
developers
complex
at the time. Yeah. And so you didn't want to have like an overly salesperson on that. You wanted to have someone who was very credible and very much like was able to help and like
Yes.
be able to guide them, but not like try to like push them into the cloud,
Because once they started spinning it up, man,
Yeah.
it grows organically. They can click some buttons and that can grow. And I just know so many AWS sellers, they're shepherds
Yeah.
of their accounts.
Yeah.
But that's a good point of like, you don't want someone too salesy.
Yeah.
And
Think about that. Yeah.
the engineering personality is quite different.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Developers as well. So like, again, it was a time where I was like doing something I'd never done before. And they were like kind enough to give me that opportunity. And like,
wow.
I'm sure I fumbled through it in the beginning, but I figured it out. And that was a lot of fun. And then again, the world shifted in a way that they were like, this cloud isn't just a fad. It's the way that everything's going. So John, the dedicated business, the cloud business, like help us bring them together as one again here. So like taking the cloud sales team that I built and unifying it with the traditional sales team was a fun part of that journey. Fast forward, we're now publicly traded, 7,000 global, there was a lot of change that went on through that time. But look, the 13 years I was there, it's where I grew up. It's where I talk about like the most when people ask me about my career. It showed me what I was good at. And I think like that people that are starting out in their career, like you have to try things to figure out what you're good at. You need to try different size companies to understand like where do you have the most impact and have the most fun. And, I think finding your stage fit is super important.
Wow.
But, after those 13 years, like it was good to be able to sit back at the end and say like, where were the days that I ran to work, excited about what we were working on and like the projects we had at hand. And then where were the days that I like had to psych myself up in the car to go in that day? And there was plenty of them up at the end. It was like when we got to be really big and slow moving and not, a company that was changing or transitioning a lot. And so ever since Rackspace, like my stage fit is helping companies go through kind of the awkward adolescence phase, like helping them grow up and mature. And, that's kind of guided a little bit of my picking, as you mentioned. So I've flipped companies that are kind of reaching these inflection points. They need to think about the strategy in different ways and, bring in different viewpoints or maybe, help the team level up to that next level. And that's what I love to do.
So the ones that came after, like Spiceworks, WP Engine, Canva, Demandbase, so many good companies. Oh my gosh, and Orum. They all were going through adolescent phase when you got to them, including you'd say Orum.
Yeah,
because is Orum Series B?
Series B. Yeah,
okay,
exactly. So
can you describe a little more the adolescent phase? And I'm asking like two questions in one, but you mentioned strategic thinking, and I saw your LinkedIn profile. You're good at that, and I'm like, I need to understand like what a unique opportunity here, what strategic thinking kind of means. So. One more time, what is the adolescence phase? There's growth and awkward things happening, and then we'll talk about strategic thinking and what that looks like. So,
yeah, look, when I think about companies, like when you break through different revenue milestones is what I use. Some people use headcount.
Yeah,
pick your measurement. Whatever rationally fits for you. But for me, revenue milestones are like really important. But I would say like a startup going from like 0 to 10 million, like that's a whole different kind of like motion. Like you need. Folks that are very like, big risk personalities, people who really like to like build and scrap their way through things. Like sometimes they call it cowboy country, but I think like it does, mean that you have to be someone who like every single day you get up and you try something different, right? It's like, okay, this might not be working or this is starting to work. How do we, kind of do
Okay.
that, right? But you're trying to figure out product market fit. You're trying to figure out your sales process, your pitch, like all these things are being formed in that kind of 0 to 10 million. 10 million and above, you've got product market fit, so now it's like, okay, we know what we want to be and we know what our product is at least, and we're starting down that path. And so you start to think about like what investments do you make and what does the strategy need to look like for that? I would say like the next big milestone, like 10 to 50, like is a kind of an interesting one where I think, you need to be more repeatable. So it's not like every day we try something different and see if it works. It's like, okay, we're doubling down more on the things that are working. We're starting to think about more process and how to make things more repeatable. And, I think process gets a bad, rap. It just means like, what are the things that we do as we add more people in here, and how do we make sure that when we bring someone new in, they're not having to figure it out all over again?
Yeah, and oh man, it's actually so important. But of course, the boots on the ground might complain a bit, but it's important for the business.
Yes, it gets a bad rap for a reason. I think it can get overly done, and like I've seen in my career where it's like process for process sake, and so like I think you should be. 10 to 50, it's minimum viable process,
Yeah, I like
you're
that.
starting to think through
I like that.
Yeah. 50 to 100 is a whole new, I would say, like animal. And I think like that's where you start to see like maybe folks coming in from outside, because they've helped kind of through this journey, because I think like the early folks that were the builders and the folks that are doing that, like it's good to surround yourself with folks that have done this before. Like someone actually told me, I forget who the quote was, but it was I was Brian Halligan at HubSpot. But he was like, when you get to that phase, you want someone, it's like an icy lake, and you want someone that's actually skated across the lake before and can pull you along, not let you just slip and fall on your face, right? And so I think it's so important to bring in folks who get that phase and understand like, okay, we're going to do these 2-3 things. And then, after we knock those out, like these are the next 3 things that are going to break. And like, you can kind of get through that faster. And so, 50 to 100 is a different animal. 100 beyond, takes on all different kind of nuances. But I think just thinking about those segments and like where you have the most fun, where you like get the most excited, like where do you get the energy from, like figuring that human stage fit is what I like to call it, is for, folks that are listening to this, trying to figure out, what they want to be when they grow up, and, where they think they can have the biggest impact.
You've given the audience permission to experiment.
Yeah.
And, I want to talk about strategic thinking, because when you start out in your career, you're an SDR, you're an execution machine. You're a professional doer. You're making calls, and Orum's going to help you with that, of course. But what does strategic thinking look like? Because clearly it's a skill set you've mastered.
Yeah, and I think like, what it looks like at that level, probably also goes back to things that I did in my career that, kind of maybe mindset-wise helped me get here. When I was at Dell, and it's great to hear that there are folks that you're working with that listen to this are at Dell.
Yeah.
At that time, they had become a really big behemoth. And I remember like dealing early in my career, with actually a tax office. It was a Jackson Hewitt tax office that had ordered like 100 computers in time for tax season, and like when they showed up, they didn't work. They were like not imaged with the right things. The CD-ROM drives, when those were coming out in machines, didn't work with the software. So it was this weird spot of like, they were like, gosh, tax season is like 3 weeks away. What do we do? And I remember Dell was like, just have them send them back, return, these pallets of, computers, and then we'll ship them out when we get them back, kind of thing. And I was like, that won't work. Like, they're going to totally miss their tax season deadline here, and they're not going to be able to do their job. And so, at the time, like, it was really hard to find somebody who cared, and it was really hard to find somebody, who would help me get that, kind of approved and be able to ship out the right resource to either fix those computers or, send them out computers in advance of them sending them back. But I did, and it was, it was a little bit of just being persistent and like digging in your heels for the right reasons, but I remember at the time, everybody was like, yeah, like most folks would have given up, like the walls of resistance you had to kind of punch through there. Made the difference for this customer and made them, a lifetime, kind of buyer of Dell, products here. Inversely, when I got to Rackspace, like, I think that was that like light bulb moment for me of like, this is the environment I thrive in. I remember bringing up like a broken process to my manager and just saying, hey, like, this is broken. And, she looked at me at the time and said, well, what do you want to do about it? And I remember I was like, oh my God, like, I don't have to go through all that hard work and like, make a case to do the right thing. We put a solution in place later that afternoon.
Oh.
I got to put my fingerprints on it and actually like, made the business better. And I would say at that level of your career, like spotting some of these inefficiencies and coming up with ideas that really can help the business, like that's strategic. Like I think some people think it is like, help me spot the next big business opportunity, what is the big bet? But I think in your purview, it's like, how do you make, customers happier? How do you make others in your role more effective? Like spotting those things and coming with solutions, I think is key there too. Like, I think that's one of the things that I really loved that leader said, like, what do you want to do about it? And I was like, okay, like that's now back on me, and, I do also love to tell people like, problem identification is easy, problem solving is like where, the money's made. And,
Yes.
being able to spot these things and not just signal like, hey, boss, leader I work for, like this is broken, come to the table with an idea or a better solution. And like, that's the kind of stuff that makes you stand out. And I think is strategic, when you're going through that, if you have a different way of, going after prospects, or if you have like some different messaging that's resonating or a different tool that you want to implement, like, take those bets and make those, kind of your strategic, kind of areas of focus. Like that's the stuff that gets you rewarded and gets you promoted.
So even an SDR can start to operate strategically. They could identify a broken process that they could make more efficient, not just for them, but for the broader org and their peers. Yeah. Maybe a go-to-market playbook, or, well, that's a little advanced, but, or like a cadence that works. And so I think you made the idea of being strategic accessible for all of us.
Yeah.
So it's funny, I bring up go-to-market playbook and I'm like, now I'm partly tempted to ask you about that, but also where my brain goes is as we get on the path to the C-suite, I think of Canva, Demandbase, and we talked about Orum, which is fun, but funny enough, Canva is product I know and love. Mm-hmm. My programs of courses and the coaching that I have on top, Tech Sales Accelerator, it's outbound for SDRs and AEs. It helps people break in, even get promoted. I have 400 plus slides made on Canva.
Wow.
My whole everything's on Canva.
Yeah.
Even the speeches I spoke to SDRs at Zoom Info recently. I've been doing more talks on outbound. It was built in Canva. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Awesome.
And so this idea of a playbook, I'm almost curious to get your high level thoughts on it, but I also want to ask you about Canva. So what we'll do is we'll put a pin in the playbook. Maybe we won't even get to it. Okay. Yeah. But like, what was like a lesson or two from Canva? And then maybe we could look at Demandbase, but let's talk about Canva. What was like a lesson from your experience there?
Look, I think actually like my story, has been uniquely guided by decisions I've made and, kind of, timing, happenstance, chance.
Yeah.
Like, look, Dell set me up to go to Rackspace and really thrive at Rackspace. Rackspace taught me what I was good at and what I really enjoyed. So every company that I chose after that was going through this like stage and phase that I really liked and knew how to solve the problems on. And so WP Engine, was a similar one where it was, 50 million when I joined. When I left, it was 400 million.
Wow, man. And I'm glad you hit on that. WP Engine is just a household name here in Austin.
Yeah.
So I know so many greats who were over there. So yeah.
It was a fun one to be a part of. And again, it was, a team with a dream or, a team that had some things figured out, but like, wanted to move in new ways and like really wanted to think about, how they went to market in different ways. And so it was a lot of fun just to be a part of that and just, get to be, in that story. Canva came to me actually through like, kind of connection that I have with an investor, the early investor in Rackspace, also invested in Canva.
Wow.
And the neat thing is they said, hey, look, there's these two young founders. They're 32. They're in Australia. They want to move to the US. They have an enterprise offering. They want someone who understands like how to tackle new markets, how to, open up offices, how to build sales teams from the ground up. Would you talk to them? And, I was super intrigued. Canva, again, I also agree. I have probably not as many slides as you, but I use it for everything. In fact, I've resisted the urge to go back to G slides and still build stuff in Canva as much as I can or convert it.
It's so nice. So, and by the way, speaking of sending signals, the professionalism of a Canva deck, it's real nice. And I will tell you, my last company before I leaped into entrepreneurship, I asked the head of marketing for advice, and she's the one who said Canva.
Yeah. Look, I think actually, like, as folks who are looking for, what is my thing that I can really do to stand out? Like Canva can help. And I do think, one of the things I really love too is the ability to voice over slides there, with the, kind of recording.
Wait, I didn't even know about that.
Oh, wow,
that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So for all your training, and I mean, it puts basically your face in a little bubble on there, and you can like talk through it. And so,
wow.
I've seen folks using it for like leave behinds with clients, that are unresponsive, and they want to, basically say like, hey, here's a 3-minute presentation I made for you. It's uploaded in the cloud via Canva, and
beautiful.
It has like my talk track over it. I think it's, it would be powerful for getting your idea across, and it's, an easy premise in that they wanted design tools to be accessible to everyday people like yourself and I.
Oh, totally. I'm an everyday guy. That's why I love it. So
I aspire to be creative, and it helps me look like I am. And that's what's great about it. But look, it was a ton of fun to join them. They had gotten to 250 million. So again, back to like my stage journey, this one was unique in that they got to 250 million, never had a sales team. They had always sold to consumers. Which is a magical, powerful thing. But they found that they wanted to go into enterprise, and they wanted business users to use Canva. And they tried to do PLG, and they realized like you won't scale from there. Like people at Google will use it, and there'll be like 5 people at Google, but they won't work together and use it to collaborate. They won't, ask their boss to get it for their entire department. You need a sales team. And so it was a really cool moment for me to partner up with them to think about like, how do you add the sales touch point? When is the right time to do it? How do you think about like the expectations of, kind of these big businesses and build a product that fits them? So again, I got to use that, same muscle that I used early in my career of like, go help us think about what an enterprise product would look like, because it's probably not the same that our consumers buy. And, there was actually some fun conversations with the founders of like all the things that Canva could do for everybody. Like big companies didn't want that. They didn't want like templates for CrossFit studios in there and like all the stock imagery that, they give free to everybody. They wanted their images in there. They wanted their brands, kind of templates and standards. Right. And so like we had to kind of re-engineer the product and make it, better for this audience. But look, it was a lot of fun. I would say like, Rackspace was fast growth and like, challenged me and scaled me in a lot of ways. WP Engine was fast growth. Canva was like, take those two, add them together, multiply times 3.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so, when I was there, this was their kind of like parabolic time as well. They went from 250 million to $1 billion in the 3 years that I was there. And so it was a lot of fun to help them like figure out how do you do that?
Holy cow.
And, how do you build a team that can work through that and a product that can scale through that? And so, it was a ton of fun. And I think like if I would have gotten the jobs out of sequence, I would have failed at Canva. I think the good news is, I had 1 or 2 of these under my belt. So it gave me the confidence to go into it knowing like, these are the things we need to do. And like, let me find, the right, kind of people and sales athletes to bring in and help us, kind of scale this in the right ways.
It's so cool to talk to a leader who has led at pivotal moments for all these companies that have impacted me. Like I told you, when I was at Google Cloud, Rackspace came in and trained us up. I built my whole business now on Canva in terms of presentations. We hear about Michael Karp using Orum over at Ramp, right? And now Demandbase.
Yeah.
Right. I talk to even reps I work with, and I hear about, I actually haven't used Demandbase, but doesn't it like provide like great, it helps from like a marketing perspective, like inbound leads. And I need some education, but the fact that even though I didn't use it, people I know at great companies are using it. So I bring it up as a segue to talk a little about Demandbase at a high level. Like can you remind me at least in the audience, like what Demandbase does? And then maybe we can pick a lesson. I'm looking at the clock because we got a couple important topics close to the heart to hit on. So
you and I could ramble for a while. Well, actually I want to say to Michael Karp at Ramp, like I appreciate them using us and shouting us out. I love their product. Like actually, we are a Ramp customer. And
cool.
I am the worst at filling out my expense reports. I'm always the guy who pays himself back last, and, it's just such a game changer.
Isn't that cool? Great companies working together.
The love and feeling is mutual. And I haven't said I love an expense platform, ever in my life. So like record this date and time. And
we got to record it
for me. Yeah.
So, okay. Demandbase, like what does some of the core problems Demandbase solves? And then let's pick a lesson from your time there.
Yeah, I think like the easiest thing, like I do also like love that the way that we sell and the way that we market and the way that buyers buy, it's all this is shifting. And so Demandbase, for like the easiest terms is account-based marketing, which is signal-based selling. So I think everybody talks about signals,
yes,
and there's lots of great players who talk about different signals to incorporate. I would say Demandbase, 6sense, they're in the category of account-based marketing, which allows you to see like one, who's anonymously coming to your website, who's researching you, like the way that buyers buy isn't the linear, like, I want to buy something, I'm going to go talk to a seller at XYZ company. I'm not going to go straight to Ramp and say, like, give me a sales pitch. Like, I want to go research Ramp. I want to go research 3 or 4, near competitors. I want to talk to a friend. I want to ask maybe in a community that I'm in, like, who uses these platforms. And so, one, Demandbase allows you to track that buyer and understand, like, okay, when they're coming to you, like, this isn't their first time to hear about you. Like, they've done all this extra homework. So, like, meet them where they're at.
Cool. Yeah.
Start with the ground zero cold start pitch. It's like, okay, I understand, that you may be facing this problem and you may have thought about us and other, kind of providers in our space. Let me tell you how we're different, right? So you really kind of, can pick up where they are and not take them all the way back to the beginning where we used to be. And so I think the signals piece is awesome. And it's a huge way to like understand, how buyers are buying and be able to work with them in the way that suits them best. It also allows you to do like very targeted advertising. So you can also make sure that, if I'm looking at Ramp and, Ramp was using ABM, like if I've been to their website, like I start to get all of a sudden these advertisements that show up wherever I go on the internet with like messaging that knows me, that actually resonates with me. And so those things combined really make for, I think, a strong, buying, kind of decision, because it's reinforced by all these different touch points.
So just tell us a little bit about the journey at Demandbase. Like, was there something new you learned in your career from your time at Demandbase?
Yeah, look, I'm always learning. And
okay, real quick, by the way, you got an endorsement. It might be by Robert M. or something on LinkedIn. I was doing, speaking of Demandbase, like you kind of learn about in stock customers. We're professional stalkers in sales. And he said that you could school anyone on any topic. You actually have a comment on there. And so I think you were saying you're curious. And again, it's funny, we've talked about so much, my brain is jumbled, but clearly a curious guy would end up getting a comment like that. So I'm sure it has really taken you places. So man, tell us about the role curiosity has played in your journey.
It's naturally who I am. So it's something that I've had to work on. But I think like, if you are like me, like embrace it and lean into it. If you're not, like, and develop it, because I think the world is changing and you have to be kind of constantly adapting and learning. And so I think it's such a strong skill to have in this profession, and it definitely has, kind of served me well and helped me in a lot of ways there.
So I did interrupt for that tangent, your flow, where you were talking about kind of laughing going into Demandbase.
What did I learn?
So
sorry,
I had to take it on the tangent.
Learnings, I have a ton. But look, this one was an interesting one. Demandbase, for context, has been around for about a decade. They're about 250 million. So I think some people would say, like, John, this one doesn't fit your mix and profile. And like, you said you like to help companies grow up. Like, that feels like a pretty grown up company. The neat thing about Demandbase is they went out and acquired 4 companies in the pandemic. So it was the core Demandbase, product. It was a company called Engagio, another company called Demand Matrix. A number of other data providers, which data is everybody's goldmine right now, you know? And so, look, they stitched these pieces together, and, the combined pieces when I joined were about 200 million. But where we were from an operational standpoint, we felt like you took 4 companies that were under 100 million and stuck them together and, had to think about how do you catch the team up, your messaging up, like how do you unify the sales team? And so it was a grow up moment, like I mentioned, that I like to help the awkward adolescent company kind of make that grow up moment there. Like, this was a big company that kind of skipped some steps. Like they tested out of high school and went to college kind of thing.
And they hit their growth spurt, man, and they weren't ready for it.
Yeah. And so like it showed up in all sorts of fun ways. Like I do remember looking at our website at the time when I got there, and it looked like you took 4 companies and just mashed their websites together.
That's crazy.
And so I remember thinking like, okay, in the interview process, I know what you do, but when I go to your website, like I'm confused. And then when I go to the product page, like surely that'll tell me what you do because that's what I want to buy from you. And I'm like, I'm even further confused, right? And so like, it was really fun to work with marketing and my CMO there to think about like, what is our story to the market and how do we tell it cohesively? And then like, how do we get our field organization unified? And like the crazy thing is we took 4 field organizations and mashed them together. And it showed up in lots of weird ways. Like when I looked at the data, it was like, okay, John, who came in through Engagio, like he still sells Engagio. He doesn't sell all these other things, right? And we put the companies together because the bet was that all four were better than the individuals. But we didn't take the time to catch everybody up and to really kind of fill in the gaps and make sure that everybody who kind of was from the Inside View acquisition knew the Engagio product and knew the Demand Matrix product, right? Like we had to cross train them on all these different aspects, and we had to change our like pitch to be able to tell like why these four pieces come together to make this great puzzle. But that was missing when I got there. And so it was a lot of fun to go through that with them and help them get through that journey.
Wow. Helping a company that was like four companies just thrown together, figure things out and get through that adolescent phase. That's pretty cool. And now, John, having this conversation with you is like a discovery call with a top executive, and I'm making a classic mistake. I'd typically, as a seller, want to end early and give you time back.
Yeah.
But we got 3 minutes, and I have 3 more questions I wanted to ask you.
Rapid fire. We'll go quick here.
Okay. You're a chief growth officer. That's a cool title. I'm like, you were CRO at Demandbase. That's a cool title. Is it like CRO plus marketing? Can you just help us understand like the breadth of what you cover?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we're going to talk about human nature and your sabbatical. And then
Awesome.
we're done. But okay.
Yeah.
Your role.
This is a quick, easy one, but
Yeah,
Chief
okay.
Growth Officer encompasses marketing. It's a lot of fun for me to do that. Like usually I own, the go-to-market aspects that are the sales teams. I partner with great CMOs. Now I get to actually work with great marketers, and like we get to work together cohesively. And so it's been a lot of fun. And I think when you're a smaller company, like putting those aspects together just makes for such a more efficient machine. So it's been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. So, it's funny. I am losing my train. Okay, here we go. I'm back.
Yeah.
Man, what a fun conversation. But getting into like clearly you're passionate about human nature.
Yeah.
And by the way, human nature is sometimes you lose your train of thought.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But we were talking before this, having our coffee, like you're passionate about people.
Mm-hmm.
And so just we riff on this concept of what we were talking about before and like kind of your heart behind that?
Yeah, look, I think actually, again, I hope there's some folks who are listening to this that, this stuff all resonates. And I hope that, there's a younger version of me that's getting to take this in. But I would say like, look, things that I learned about myself when I was in college was that I like enjoyed just understanding, other humans and like, where did they come from? Like, what was their upbringing? Like I was the guy you didn't want to be in study hall with because I was the guy who was like interviewing, people in those rooms and just like out of genuine curiosity. It's like you grew up on like a farm. Like, what was that like? You grew up in a big city, right? And so like always had that in my nature. I also, being a pre-med biology major, I took a lot of classes in psych and I found like I really enjoyed human psychology. And so I think if there's any folks that majored in psych, like I think like that probably serves me the most and is probably the most important like stuff that I took in my undergrad. But it, those were like early signals that I would probably really like this career and do well in it. And I think, I use this still today, every day. Like, I think as my team goes through like tough times or struggles, like I think as a, people leader, like your job is to manage like the motivation and energy of sometimes 6, 8 people. So you and I talked about it. Like, I think like, rule number 1 is it starts with you. Like, I think you have to actually show up every day, like, in the best headspace, like bringing your best. And like, if things are out of sorts in your life, like try to figure that out because it just makes you a more genuine people leader. It's okay to talk about it too. I think we talked about Alex Kremer, and I think like Alex Kremer, when he was a leader, talks a lot about different times where he was, actually like, able to be vulnerable and say like, man, like my girlfriend broke up with me. I had a bad day. Like, can we, take a pause today and not do this meeting, And so I think like being in tune with that, recognizing it. So, but I think like starts with you as a leader, get yourself in, check and try to do the best things to make sure you are healthy and active and doing things to manage your stress. And then you're in a better spot to be able to like understand your team and the people that are on it and like what their motivations are. And I think like, young managers often think like what motivates me should motivate these 8 people. And that's not the case. Like everybody has different motivators, right? Everybody has different drivers, they have different goals. And so I think like, that was kind of already built into my DNA of like, I want to understand the person who grew up on a farm versus the person who grew up in a city. Like that was, how I treated my team. Like I wanted to really get to know them. I wanted to understand like what motivated them. And then I applied, the right coaching to meet them where they're at with their motivation. And so I think that's, super important. So I enjoy like actually working with, young sellers, young leaders. I get a bunch of energy out of it, and I know you do as well. Like that's why you're here. But I think that that's such a fun part of this career and profession. It can be taxing and it can take a toll on you. And I think like, I talk to a lot of folks who are like, I'm 8 people's punching bag, and that like doesn't feel good. But I think the better leaders are the ones that are able to manage through that and understand that and process and not take it out on the team if they're having a bad day, and like, also be able to guide their team when they are going through tough stuff, pick them up off the floor and help them get kind of re-energized and focused again.
Guys, this is the type of leader you want to work for. And John, you could have been a doctor. You also could have been a top podcaster like next Joe Rogan because of your curiosity. You're interviewing people. Yeah. So it's funny. You have a natural wiring for it, but it helps in sales. Yeah. And just the way you allow people to feel acknowledged and seen, and your vulnerability is powerful. And so the final, I might sneak in one more question with calls to action, but the final topic or high level question is about your sabbatical, because you're a self-professed workaholic on LinkedIn, and you were, and I feel the same way. Sometimes I hide behind my work, and it's my badge of honor, and that's obviously what it takes to produce great things. But you took a sabbatical, so walk us through what that looked like, and then what you learned from it.
Yeah. We only have a few minutes, I guess. This is good. Other hour.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't give you more time for it, but the reality is you have so much to share, and I just couldn't help it, man. So
no, look, I'll tease out what I can in this story as much as possible. But like, I think there is a lot of folks in your audience who, are going to go through this. If they're not, now, will later. And so I think I think it's my duty to make sure that I share my story on this. Look, Canva was crazy. Like I mentioned, it was like take the 2 fastest startups I'd been a part of and then multiply it times 3. I worked for young founders that were in Australia. So it meant that I was working all hours. Like I think actually like 6 months in, the founder that I reported to was like, are you working US or Australia hours? And I'm like, both.
Oh gosh.
And I had, lots of meetings, at 2 a.m. on a regular occasion. I had, times where I was working all days of the week, because there's, Australia is not only on a completely different time zone, that's inverse of ours here. They're a day ahead of us. And so, I would catch up with the founder on his Saturday, which was my Friday. And then we'd have staff meetings on Sunday, with the rest of the team in Australia. So it was just like, go for 3 years. And I agree. I would say like one of my strengths is that my work ethic, and it probably was conditioned in me early, and, has served me well, but it has sometimes not been my best attribute. And I think, as I've gotten older maybe, and as I've had a family, like I, was telling Chris that I, tend to try to be good at everything in my life, which means like I fail all the time. Like, let me just say, like, this is not an aspirational story of like, you can be perfect at all things you can't.
Wow.
But, what I did find was actually like my wife came to me, and, my wife and I have a great partnership. She manages the house. We have 2 teenage boys. She gave up her career early to really support me and allow me to do a lot of the heroic things.
I have to say, that's the dream, man. I'm looking for that lady. That is done. Yes, that's awesome.
Get yourself a Merely Eitel. I was going to say it would make your career go faster.
Wow. Wow.
And she is my like superpower. Yeah. My life is powered by my wife in a lot of ways. But inversely, she said something that I needed to hear. But when we were going through this, the time I was building Canva was during the pandemic as well. And I think that other, workaholics like myself and maybe folks on this podcast, like, found another gear. Like we actually, poured ourselves more into work. Like, I think I've talked to so many folks who are like, yeah, the pandemic was great because we worked from home, but I just basically found out I sleep at the office, and so I think like I was that guy. And so anyways, my wife said, look, I know that I've always said, like, I've got the kids and, you work on the business and we high five at night and, we do this together. But she was like, look, these 2 boys of ours, like they're teenagers, they're in high school, like they're testing boundaries, like they're being just normal boys. And she was like, look, when you're in the room, they change completely. She was like, they totally snap into line. And, I feel like they're testing boundaries. They're taller than me. My wife's 5 foot tall. So she's short in stature, but don't let that fool you. She can drop the hammer on those boys like nobody's business. But anyways, she had realized like, look, I, wasn't there for them in the times that I needed to be. And look, it was the knife in the heart moment I needed, because I was like, okay, I've really gotten a balance out of a thing that like should matter the most, and I think we talked a lot about before this podcast, like the importance of, finding that partner and having a family, and many of your listeners are there. Like when you find yourself that far out of balance, it's important to realize it and recognize it. And so, it took me a while to get there because like the company was growing, the valuation was growing, like my role was important and it was my identity in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But, it was the absolute right decision for me to go to the founders and say, look, it's probably time for me to step back and like, I need to help you find my replacement. We're going to make this like the best transition that's ever happened. But like, I need to probably step off of this,
Wow.
hamster wheel for a bit here. And, I remember actually when I came home and told my wife, who like gets the, knife in the heart moment on, kind of like letting me know, like I'm out of balance and I need to be checked. But she was like, I never thought you would do it. And she
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
I'm so like proud and impressed that you put us first. Right. And so,
Wow.
anyways, if you're ever feeling that way, I think like, know that you can do these things. For me, it was, another podcast, another time, like I would say, like I took almost, 8-9 months off, in total, because there was some transition,
Yes.
before I left. But, it was a great amount of time. And I would say I screwed it up a bunch in the beginning. Like, I think if you're used to going all the time like that, like going all of a sudden to zero, like it just can feel so uncomfortable and it can be really hard. But I would say like I grew so much in that. And like through my screwing up a bunch of the like early phases and beginnings of it, I had a good friend who was like, you got to say no to everything and like let only the things in that matter. And like, that was so important for me to hear that. And again, back to things I screwed up. Like, I was like, I got this. And then like 3 weeks later, like my wife was like, what gives? I thought you were winding down things at Canva. You're more busy than you ever were. And because I was letting everything in, trying to just appease friends. And so I started saying no to everybody and like got to like this very uncomfortable spot. And then the fun part was I was like, okay, I'm going to let things in and I'm only going to let them in if they touch 3 things. Like if it helps me be a better father, if it helps me be a better husband, if it helps me be better to myself. Like that was like my big 3.
Wow.
And if it didn't hit those things, then I was like, I said no. And like, that was a pretty like, fun journey to go through. I think like I got to do some really cool things with my kids, like connect with them in like really fun ways. And, the big impetus on this too is my oldest was about to go to college. And I realized like, oh my gosh, I blinked and his high school career just went by. And so like we bought an old car and restored it. And that was a ton of fun. My youngest actually came to me and said, Dad, I want to make the high school football team. And I was like, I am out of shape. Like, let's get in the gym together. And so like that became our daily ritual of like, let's go work out together. But yeah, just like little things like that, being present, like really set me up. And then when I went back, the good news is like, I didn't just like return back to normal me. I was like, I'm going to do it now with like the right guardrails, with the right foundation, the right way to make sure that I don't have to have my wife, give me another one of those, like, wake up, you idiot, calls here. You're dropping the ball again on the wrong things. Like that's something that I won't let happen again. And so, it was super important for me to go through it.
That was so powerful. I'm not going to add any commentary on that. But I'm going to watch that over and over. And I hope some other CROs or leaders can see this and give themselves permission to make the changes they need to be in alignment with putting first things first, being with your family. And I love that example of being able to, with that car, like what's the term? Like, I guess not refurbish, that's a house, but like,
yeah.
kind of got to rebuild
restore an old car,
restore it.
Yeah.
And so, and I said I wouldn't make a comment, but here I am. Like that. What a note to end on. So, John, thank you. It's so generous for you to share your energy, your curiosity, your insight with us, your journey. I'm going to encourage the audience to download that white paper with Jason Bay. I'm going to link that. And of course, check out Orum, and also
super powerful stuff too. I would say if I can plug that, like we gave away, I think, a masterclass of helpful things here, but it's basically the 1 billion calls that we've had on our platform.
That's nuts.
We've analyzed
1 billion
it.
calls?
Yeah. So we've analyzed it and we've given insights into everybody. Like, we've shared it with the sales community, like what successful teams are doing, like what teams at Ramp may be doing that might be similar to you. And
okay.
So
I need to download it, by the way. I haven't, I'm going to dig into it. So guys, download that. I'm going to add your LinkedIn profile for people to follow you, because you've mentioned some posts that are, you have insightful posts, also vulnerable, real posts that resonate with people. Any other things to link, or is there anything else you'd add? Or
No, I think that's a good list there. So
Cool.
yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So final words of encouragement for the audience at 20 to 30 something tech sellers. There's no right or wrong, but it's almost like we're rallied in the fourth quarter of a basketball game. I don't know why I chose basketball, and just final words of encouragement to our audience.
Yeah, look, I think I am so happy that my life took me on this, kind of trip. And like, it's fun to be where I'm at, and it's fun to be, working with so many folks like, the folks in your audience. And so, I think like these times are tough right now. And I do feel like, sales is changing like so dramatically right now. But like, this is what forms the foundation for the next leaders. Like, I think I'm here today because I got to go through the .com bubble, like, bursting epically. I was able to be, selling in 07, 08 when all the banks were going through, transition and crisis. And, I feel like now feels like those two kind of put together in some ways and with some new different things. So look, lean into the discomfort, like have fun with this as much as it's, going to suck and it's going to feel like you're getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
But I think
that hits home with me.
It's going to make you better.
Home.
It's going to make you better. And, I think that's the important thing. Like it's shaping you while you're going through it. And so, hopefully you'll be, in my chair, telling these same stories, as you go through this journey.
John, what a journey. And you're just getting started, but you show us what's possible. You show me what's possible. And to the audience, you guys are just getting started. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of this growing tech sales community. I respect you for your curiosity and investing in your personal and professional development. And to your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one.